This edition of our podcast is brought to you by 360 Health and Well Balanced Nutrition.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey guys, Kristen and Eleanor here. As you know, we're switching things up. We're slowing down and digging deeper. So we are still talking about the book Forever Strong by Dr. Gabriel Lyon. And, you know, instead of cramming one book into one episode, we're just having these bite-sized conversations. And today's bite-sized conversation gets into the nutritional science from her book. We're going to talk a little bit about where nutrition recommendations come from. And, you know, Dr. Lyon makes the point that so much nutrition wisdom is built on faulty premises. She wants us to have a discerning eye to our daily choices and writes a chapter helping readers vet any new health claims they encounter. So this has some juicy topics we're going to dive into a little bit.
Yeah, Gabrielle Lyon has a few little chunkets that are pretty cool. She says you need to know what to do, and then you want to learn how to think about it. And so we refer to these experts as we're foundering those questions. Okay, I want to be healthy, and I want to know how to be healthy, and I want to know what to do, and I want to know how to think about it. So I'm going to go to the experts. Well, where does that expert advice come from? And so we have a history that we can maybe learn from, and it's kind of fun. And I am not your nutritionist, so Kristen's going to probably jump in here and correct me or add some things to it. But it seems like at one point in the United States, we were agrarian, and we had little farms, and we sort of grew our food and ate it, right?
Yeah.
So it was a meat and plant-based diet. Well, somewhere around, as she says, politics, social agendas, morality, and religion have always played a role in dietary choices. But did you know how significantly such external factors have affected nutrition science?
I think we're all very much aware of that these days.
Okay. And so she says that in the mid-1800s, we have Sylvester Graham. Who's ever eaten a graham cracker? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're kind of good. I make s'mores with them. Well, he was what we call the father of vegetarianism. And he was taking a religious thing, saying, like, out of concern that both meat and alcohol promoted gluttony, harming individuals' families, he called for a simpler, plainer, more natural diet, excluding meats, white flour, condiments, and spirits in favor of consuming fresh fruits and vegetables. So that sounds a little bit about the advice we're getting today.
Yeah.
No alcohol.
Listen, I'm just picturing, like, what if we had Instagram back then? He would be an influencer.
I think so. So he launched the first plant-based movement. And now we're into another iteration because Michael Pollan came along and wrote some books called Eat Plants and Eat More Plants.
Eat more plants.
And Colin Campbell did the China study and showed how that's a good thing. And the Blue Zones came along and said, these plant-based diets seem to promote longevity. Well, anyway, then she goes on and tells us about another person that moved away from animal protein, and that was John Harvey Kellogg. You remember granola? Mm-hmm. Cereal? And so she says, I find it fascinating to consider the incredibly powerful influence Kellogg and Graham continue to have on the standard American diet, which is what we call the SAD diet of today. And then she talks about wartime. We got into the war years, and we did rationing, and we found that we could meats and fats are just as nutritious in the war as are the tanks and the airplanes, so they wanted to get meat to these guys. So a lot of the work that we come from looking at fortifying soldiers and young men, not women, not the total population. So it was geared toward preventing deficiencies and focused explicitly on boosting short-term performance, rather than optimizing long-term health. Government-funded studies led to the development of dietary guidelines that are still influencing us today. And so she is talking about the RDAs, are minimum intake requirements. And I remember, Kristen, I had a product that I was a little concerned about that I was recommending because it was very low in protein. And I asked you about it. You said, remember, those are, the minimum, because it met the minimum. But I thought, oh, that doesn't sound like enough protein. But it was, people look at those labels. We're reading labels, and it says, what percentage of the RDA is this? Recommended daily
Allowances.
Allowance, yeah. Thanks. See, I know she could correct me. Well, anyway, so she goes on and builds this strong evidence coming from randomized controlled trials, which is what we're looking to now. Is when we're questioning, what information do I believe and what do I incorporate into my life? Maybe if it comes from the studies that are randomized controlled studies, we're a little more secure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, can I interject?
Yes, please do.
So it might be too soon to go into the RDA guidelines. But so she says, well, I think it was a good explanation in this book that why it's just enough and not optimal is because it's enough for your organs to have what they need to get the amino acids to run or whatever. But it forgets about the muscle. So muscle cannot have all it needs to thrive and survive. And that's why the RDA guidelines at 0.8 gram per kilogram, or that's about 0.35 per pound, is not enough for optimal nutrition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, she has a much higher recommendation than I do.
And we're going to get there.
Yes.
But before we get there, okay, so we have the history of how we moved away from meat to plant and how we got these recommended allowances. But then she says, to get confusing even more and even contradictory, you have these bodies like the USDA, the NIH, the World Health Organization, and NASFNB, whatever that is, telling us what to do. So it's like an alphabet soup of, well, what do I do? And the compounding the issue is that all the agencies factor not just evidence-based nutrition into their public policy recommendations, but also food industry priorities. So then we get into the influence of the corporation into what does the public have access to. And so we turn into these words that I thought were kind of fun to think about, commodities. Mm-hmm. Okay, the term commodity refers to a basic agricultural product like soy, corn, wheat, coffee beans, sugar, eggs, milk, fruit, that kind of thing. And a commodity is not a brand. So then you have this other thing that is called a consumer packaged good. And they're regulated differently. Commodities can't advertise because you can't, the group, like all the meat producers, money for advertising supports all of the meat producers.
Right.
Whereas in the consumer packaged goods, they're restricted on, what they can say against a competitor as well, or what claims they can make about their products. So a meat producer can't claim that meat is healthy and it has better protein in it than a soybean.
Well, they can say that their products are part of a healthy diet, but they can't say it's superior.
Exactly, to the other commodity. And so there's the confusion, and that's where she digs in.
Yeah.
She's saying all protein is not equal.
Right.
Okay. So does that help? Does that do what you wanted me to do here to set the stage about getting to what her recommendations are?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you ready to take control of your health and wellness journey, but don't want to do it alone? Look no further than Well Balanced Nutrition. We offer personalized nutrition and wellness coaching tailored to your unique needs. Our integrative, whole-person approach combines the latest evidence-based practices with compassionate guidance. Whether you're managing health concerns or seeking to optimize your well-being, take the first step towards a healthier, happier you by booking a free 15-minute consult with one of our registered dietitians at wellbalancednutrition.com. Well, and I'll just say, too, like my experience, we have lobbyists, too.
Well, yeah.
That can influence where the money goes. And
well, that's what our ultra-processed food author, when we read ultra-processed people or whatever, he was saying what we have access to is not necessarily good for us.
We just have to be careful who's influencing. There's always somebody influencing for some reason, for something, and we have to be aware of that. But yeah, and so this is kind of a warning to, look at the labels and be wary of those claims and know that those claims are missing, even though they could be educational.
Yeah.
On things like commodities.
Right.
And vegetables and fruits. I always wish those had like a
Label.
shiny label saying great source of potassium.
But that's one of the things the company that I like to represent talks about. They actually measure the things in the raw ingredients that they include in their products, because a beet grown in North Carolina may have different nutritional profile than one grown in Idaho.
Yeah, fair.
Because of soils and all that kind of stuff. So,
Absolutely.
there's variability in the nutritional quality of whatever you're purchasing. But anyway, back to recommendations, particularly from our healthcare. I thought this was a cool quote. She says, "The minimal nutritional information that physicians are taught in medical school is a byproduct of agenda-based instead of evidence-based medicine. This trickles down to create wellness handcuffs for both doctors and their patients."
What does she mean by that, you think? Is it the pharmaceutical industry that's...
Well, doctors and lay people unknowingly use misinformation that can lead to deadly decisions because of the undercurrents of the policies and who's regulating and who's paying salaries of,
It's so complex.
It is
isn't
complex, and so who knows what the reality is?
Yeah. Well, I'll get on my soapbox here.
Okay, go for it.
All of these authors are complaining that doctors don't have nutrition in their education. And I do think that they need lifestyle medicine education. I do. But let's stop relying on them to be the only one that delivers it. And let's realize that there are highly qualified registered dietitians who this is their job. This is, they can interpret the recommendations. They can tailor it to you. And then my other soapbox is I keep hearing influencers talk about the food guide pyramid. And for the love of everything, it has been forever since the food guide pyramid was a thing. That was in 2011. So can we stop?
Yeah.
And it just makes me think these people don't read the current guidelines or understand them, but registered dietitians do. So my call to action for everybody is to just know that we exist, and this is why we exist, and doctors and other medical professions just can lean on us a little bit more.
And we've talked about that in other podcasts. But the idea of team support for the individual. So you as an individual should construct your support team. Get an MD. Get a dietitian. If the MD is not referring you, go get one.
Right.
Because you can self-refer, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's also true for some other of the ancillary medical folks.
Like a physical therapist.
Or a trainer.
Or a personal trainer.
Yeah, and I love when we get to that discussion, she actually tells you how to shop for a personal trainer.
Nice.
And there probably recommends that how do you shop for a doctor? She doesn't talk about, but I am. And how do you shop for a dietitian? I mean, because there's variability in the marketplace.
There is. Yeah.
But anyway, as an individual, she does say, and so does some other people that are pretty smart, you need to take responsibility for yourself. Don't inform yourself, make informed decisions, and get good advice around you.
Yeah. I think it's a blend. Advocate for yourself, inform yourself, but also don't lean on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, nobody cares more about yourself than you do.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I love me some me.
You do love you some me? Okay. All right. Well,
okay, so let's dive into these RDA guidelines because this is my happy place, right? Okay. So Dr. Lyon's protein recommendations are really high, in my opinion, and not too high, just high in that, my job is to translate this into meals that people actually eat and it fit within their lifestyle. So hers is 2.2 grams per kilogram or 1 gram of protein per ideal body weight.
that's huge.
Right.
Because I'm eating a protein bar here that has 18 grams of protein in it. and it's hard. It's dense, right?
It's possible, but it is tricky, isn't it? 150 to 200 grams of protein, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so my recommendations are closer to like 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. And then if you're killing that, then great, go up from there. And I know people are like, kilograms, what are you talking about? I'm sorry, that's just how I was taught and how my brain works.
And it's a wonderful metric system. I mean, it's based on things that you can move around with. A decimal point is really good.
Yeah.
While we're still in the pound system is nuts.
Yeah.
And inches.
Well, I think, we can jump to linking this to real life, like what are the challenges of getting enough protein in?
Hey, if you're as interested in prevention as I am, contact me, Eleanor Russell, at 360health, 4u.com. Whether you're interested in financial wellness or physical health products, 360 Health invites you to become part of our community. Well, I actually think she gives some really good ideas about if you're going to get the protein in, there's things you need to think about. 3 things in particular. One is the quantity, what we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. The second one is the quality of it, and that means the amino acid profile. And then the other one is the distribution of intake throughout the day, because you can't eat that much in one sitting. Your body will not absorb it.
I'm glad you brought that up. She does say it's a lot easier to have smaller meals or snacks in between if you're...
Yeah. And we can talk about those other 2 things in the next episode, but I think we're taking that challenge on right now. Let's talk about quantity today, and then we'll do an episode and talk about the quality and distribution and her protocol in that next episode.
Yeah. So the real life challenges that I come across myself and with clients are, it's easy to skip breakfast. People don't feel hungry in the morning.
Well, people tell you don't eat breakfast anymore.
Intermittent fasting is a thing.
Yeah,
yes,
stretch that out and don't eat until noon and then eat till 6 and quit.
And now you got to find a way to get a good amount of protein in just 2 meals. That's difficult. Yeah. So that's a challenge. And then, you further see maybe just like, I'm, air quotes, eating healthy, so I'm just going to have this salad that's just lettuce and vegetables, maybe some dressing.
Some plants.
So lack of protein. And it's all like good intentioned, but protein is missing. So then you just have 1 meal a day that typically has your protein in it, and that's maybe 30 grams. Mm-hmm. When you might need closer to 150 or more.
Well, let's talk about the 30 grams. If I had 4 ounces of steak, what about how much protein would I get?
So 25 to 35.
Okay. And if I had an 8-ounce steak, I'd get twice that, right?
Yeah.
And then if I had 3 times that, like those, what are those Japanese big old on the bone?
Oh, the tomahawk.
Yeah. How much poundage of meat is in a tomahawk?
I don't know.
I mean, they're huge. It's like a couple of pounds of meat in it.
Yeah, well, I think most of the weight comes from the bone.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah.
It still looks massive when I see one. I go, there's no way one person eats that. But they do. But so I have...
Porterhouse steak.
I got a complaint or a question for Gabrielle is I've heard an awful lot about cholesterol and cardiovascular health. And she's been talking a lot about some other things that aren't specifically cardiovascular health, benefits of this muscle-centric thing. And when I was growing up, I thought that aerobic exercise was also exercising my heart and causing me to get more efficient with my heartbeats and moving the blood through my system and delivering the nutrients and removing the wastes and all of that. But cholesterol that comes in from some of these animal sources has been tagged as a bad thing for the cardiovascular system. Did you see her talk about any of that in here?
No, she doesn't really address saturated fat that we can get from these animal sources.
Exactly.
Especially if we have to eat 8 ounces or more to get our protein needs. So, yeah, I think that's an issue. And lean proteins are important.
Well, and she also talks about dementia and the benefits to this, which I believe her story, but I would like a little more discussion into these 2 areas. The apolipoprotein B the beta amylase and all that story, which is a type 3 diabetes. At least I think that's what we're calling it. Most people are thinking that's what's going on with Alzheimer's. It's but maybe not. We don't know. But
a
anyway,
blood sugar issue.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the protein that comes with that. So anyway, those were two deficiencies. As much as I love this book, I wanted more on that.
Sure.
And
yeah.
and in here, when she's talking about selecting your protein and how much do you need, I think, okay, is there any caution here with that high of a load? And you're recommending half of what she recommends?
Pretty much.
Okay.
yeah.
So
At least to start.
okay, so half your body weight in protein.
So mine is
In pounds.
1.2 to 1.6 grams
Oh.
of protein per kilogram. So that's not.
A little bit more than that then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other thing I see that's kind of a struggle. So she'll say, is it 20 to 50 in her book or 30 to 50 grams of protein per meal?
I think 30.
30 to 50, which I don't think is a bad recommendation.
Right.
I think you're going to feel fabulous if you can get that. But the trouble is, we hear things, even from our doctors, speaking of them, that, oh, this is high in protein. So here are some foods that people think might be high in protein, but actually have just only a little bit. Peanut or peanut butter, eggs. Per egg, there's really only 6 grams of protein in that.
Yeah, that's pretty good, isn't it? I mean, a glass of milk is 8, right?
But if you have to get up to 50 grams,
Oh, yeah, you'd have to. Well, and,
you can't just rely on.
well, she recommends
egg.
an omelet having 3 eggs and then an egg white. You know, did you look at her breakfast recommendation?
All that and
Yeah, it's three eggs and then an egg white too.
Yeah, well, you have to.
Yeah, to
you
get
can't,
to get to 20, 30 grams.
Yeah.
It's like I couldn't eat all that. I'd be like, ugh.
I would get full quickly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I like eggs, but after a while, I don't like the texture and all that. It's like, oh, I don't need to put that in my mouth.
And then some, like cheeses, can offer some protein, but maybe not as much as you think. And then, like, to your point a little bit, they come with a lot of fat that might not be great for your heart health. And then on top of that, a different issue I see is the plant, and she talks about this a little bit, and we'll dive in even more so. But like, so your plant-based proteins, some of them could be a good source of protein, but the amount you have to eat will be a lot more calories.
Yes.
So, for instance, like a half a cup of lentils, really only 9 grams of protein. You're going to have a whole cup of that to get closer to that.
Recommended protein. And that's like oatmeal, I think, would be an issue too, right?
Right.
Yeah, you get some protein, but you're getting a whole lot of carbs with that too. Now, she was saying a 1-to-1 carb ratio.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I don't like it.
Okay.
Not for everybody. I feel like it's a little too much.
So that would be 30. See, there's carbs, proteins, and lipids in our diet, macros, right?
Yep. Those are
And
the
there's a
macros.
ratio you can have recommendations of percentages like 50, 30, 20, or 10, 40, 30, whatever. I can't do the math.
Is she saying 1-to-1 per meal or 1-to-1 for the day? So like if you need 120 grams of protein, then you need to have 120 grams of carbs. I can't remember what it was.
Well, it's on page 165. She's talking about, calculating, using a calculator to figure all this out.
Okay, well,
Yeah, but she says 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Not your current body weight.
Right.
And then a 1-to-1 carb protein ratio for metabolically healthy individuals. So that's a qualifier. And then 0.7 to 2.2 grams of fat per day.
I'll just say you can get it personalized to you. I don't love like a blanket recommendation.
Yeah, and since I mentioned the calculator thing, she's also an advocate for bioabsorbability, which I rebel. I mean, I do wear one of these watches, and I can and I did check my pulse on that hike out on the New River Gorge the other day. But yeah, so the idea of being obsessed with measuring all this stuff and making sure I'm doing it right because I feel that from her. She's saying there's a right way to do this, and it's my way, and it's okay if you fail, but you got to be paying attention every minute to what you're doing. And I
I
don't.
do get that vibe from her too.
And I thought, I don't think that's maintainable for lifestyle.
Right.
And then this idea of tracking, wearing an insulin tracker, and hooking myself up to measurements that I'm going to be looking at all the time. I don't know if that's healthy.
Yeah, it could definitely go to the extreme.
And I think because she's a researcher more than she says she's a practitioner, but I honestly think she comes out of the research model and likes that. Mm-hmm. And her mentor is a researcher. And that's what they do with research subjects. You measure. And,
Right.
and I think she's moved some of that into the public arena, which probably isn't the place for it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I agree. I get what you're saying.
That you
We
could,
can't have a high quality life and enjoy your life if we're focused all the time on
me.
tracking things.
On me. I can't talk to you. I got to check my heart rate.
Yeah.
So that's the idea of understanding why you would construct your diet a certain way, but then just enjoying your diet. And diet meaning just what you eat, not that you're on a program.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think kind of understanding what your plate might look like is an easy way to think about, am I getting enough protein? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So are there any takeaways that we want to do?
Well, it's funny because the takeaway I was going to share is to
Measure
maybe
it.
track your protein. And I'm not talking long term. I'm just saying, are you aware of how much protein? Are you maybe one that's skipping these morning meals? Or, are you thinking, I'm eating a lot of peanut butter and eggs, so I got to be getting plenty of protein. So my takeaway was just maybe grab a notebook and track your protein intake even just for a day and see what you're getting.
And I would say for 5 days, because I think that gets you across a little bit. And I think reality checks are fine. A finger on the pulse is fine. And when we talk about accountability and monitoring, or just self-reflection and who am I becoming? Am I doing the things? I mean, it's not bad. Like you were hesitant initially to suggest this because of what I just said. But no, I think there's a time for let's do a reality check. Let's just see where am I on. Am I doing what I mean to be doing? Because my perception and what I'm actually doing oftentimes do not match.
Right, yeah.
And we get you go on a vacation and then you come back and you think you are returning to what you used to do and you don't because those potato chips tasted great because you let yourself have indulgences or whatever. Anyway, I think that would be a good, for me, I might do that. And I've done that before with, the vegetable thing or the fruit thing. We track to see, are you eating 30 different plants? And it was fun.
Yeah.
So make this a fun thing, not a chore.
Yeah.
But just say, hey, I'm kind of curious. So how much protein am I eating and what protein sources am I doing? Because the next time we get together on our podcast, we'll be talking about the quality of the proteins and digging in there a little bit.
Yeah, that'll be a fun
And
conversation.
so if you've done this, it might be informative.
Yes.
So who are you?
All right. Well, I'm Kristen Norton. I'm a registered dietitian at Well Balanced Nutrition, and we would love to help you look at your protein needs and help you meet them and figure out a way to make a lifestyle out of it that is doable. So check us out at wellbalancednutrition.com.
And I'm Eleanor at 360health4u.com, working on the prevention lifestyle and helping you assess where you want to go and what kinds of products you're bringing into your home to support that wellness journey and making sure they're the cleanest and purest you can get.
Hey, and don't forget to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you found this helpful, send it to a friend who loves wellness as much as you do.
Keep eating that protein.
The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.